let's get started on the head. Now you've got a center line and you've got a line coming the back. So that cross that I asked you to put in the middle will identify where the side line goes in as well. So you're going to put a side line in on either side using that center mark as your guide. So bring it across the top and down the side, so that now you're going to have on all four sides you're going to have a center line. Now the center line on the front is important for obvious reasons. On the side, that helps identify the location of the ear. So if you look at your diagram, let's zoom in here a little bit. So if you look at your diagram, the front of the ear is about halfway from the back of the block and to the front of the block. So if you've got the line coming down, then that'll give you a guide as to where you can find that. If you want to get out and measure things exactly, well, you can do that as well. But use it off of your center line on the side of the face, and that'll help you immensely. Okay, well, so everybody will do that first, and then we'll work at the top and work our way down. Okay, so after you've got the marks on all four sides, the center lines, try and get them as accurate as you can. Then we're going to work on the top. Now if you look at, there's no top view. Years ago these patterns all had top views. But you can see by the shape of the back and the front of the hat that it's going to be an oval. It'll end up being an oval. And if I can show you the finished one, you'll see more exactly what I mean. Can you see how much of an oval that hat is? So we're going to create the oval. So in order to do that, all we got to do is round the front and round the back. So if you mark that accordingly, can you see that this is the back, this is the front? So we're just going to take off the corners more or less, and it's going to be a bit of a flat spot on both sides here, but rounded on either end. Alright, so just put those curves in there, and that pretty well gives you the visual of the hat looking straight down from the top of the head. Now I'm going to draw your attention to these two little notches, this side and this side, that are in there, and they correspond with the marks on the diagram that are the top of the shoulder basically. I couldn't create the real top of the shoulder because the hat interferes with that. So I just put little notches in there. So his face, his chin will actually come down a little bit lower. That's why there's more material on the bottom. But just so you know that these two notches on either side are strictly just for identifying the edge. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to trim off that. We're going to make it round, or oval I guess, all the way down. Those are going to be straight up and down cuts. Remember, the grain is up and down, so be careful when you start removing that wood that it doesn't take off on you and chip, because the grain might go one way or the other. Okay? And on the back, you're going to come down and you're going to make this round on the back as well, all the way down to the top of his shoulder. So it's going to be round all the way down to the top of the shoulder. See where the shoulder is going to still stick out? Alright? The shoulder exceeds the width of the hat. Alright, so don't forget to leave that piece there. Don't go into the shoulder. So that cut that I put in there is your stop line. Okay?
Just at the back though.
That's just at the back. And on the front we're going to go top. Let's go on with more of the design on the head. So take a good look at the size of that head, and measuring down from the top, or if you want to look at it from a side view, you can do it either way. But it's important to realize that the hat extends down over his forehead. Okay, it's lower than his forehead and more or less level with his eye. Okay, so we've got a whole whack of wood in this area here that we have to get rid of. So in order to do that, we have to establish where the hat ends. So if you measure down from the top, and I say from the top because if you measure from one spot all the time, you're not going to mess up. So it's easier to measure top down than it is. So if you want to take a good look at that, and you don't necessarily have to get a measure out, but if you look at that right there, the distance in the top and the bottom is pretty darn close to being halfway. All right. So if you come up on the side and you measure halfway up on the side of your carving and eyeball it, something like that, you're going to come very close to the top of the hat. I guess the hat doesn't have to end up in exactly the same spot as the diagram, but that's, we've got the diagram in front of us, so that's what we're going to do. All right, so it's important that we get that center marked. And as soon as you get that done, then you can bring that, use your finger on the top of the carving, and now you can extend that around to include the side of the head. So it looks something like that. All right? That make sense?
You could bring that in the front?
All the way, I'm just marking up the front. I don't have to go around the back because the back's going to be hat. Okay, so this out here is going to eventually be a nose, but the nose does not extend out as far as the piece of wood, right? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to create a flat spot from the center line here to this center line here, and it's going to be straight, right straight across. We're going to get a flat spot, and that same thing will happen on the other side here. So we're going to take a V tool and we're going to cut across, leaving the hat above it, and we're going to work on this side here. And we're only going to use a V tool to cut from there to there, and then a gouge or a knife to make a nice flat surface right across there. I'll go ahead and do that and then pass it around. So the key here is to look up the carving and make sure that you've got a perfectly good triangle. So flat sides, both sides here. And now remember that the hat, this is the rim of the hat at the front. So if we look at our diagram, zoom in here a little bit. So if we look at our diagram, that's the mark where this mark is on the hat. Okay, that's the bottom of the hat, that's the bottom of the hat. So if we come straight back, you can see that that comes to just about the bridge of the nose. So now we got to remove all this wood out here in order to make it work. So it's going to be a straight triangle here, or a straight line coming out, a little bit of a flat spot for the nose, and then back again. So if I was to draw that down here, flat and down. Okay, does that make sense? So the key here is to measure in to where that tip of that nose is. So we've got to find that spot on the carving. Okay, so we got to measure in that distance. So you're going to be looking at it completely on the side view in order to accomplish that. So let me just guesstimate that. Try and do that with the camera. So if you take a look at the distance from there to the tip out here, and the distance from that tip of the nose out to here, okay, that's what we're going for. So we're trying to get that mark. So then it becomes relatively easy. See, that is roughly halfway between the bottom and the top, so maybe a little bit above. So now it's just a question of creating those two straight lines, one line there and one line there, and that'll go back up. That'll go back up into the nose. Can you kind of visualize that this is going to be the nose there, this is going to be the mouth below? So all of this wood out here has to come across, has to be removed, and it goes straight across in order to create that, straight across. So what you're going to do, and I don't know whether I can show you on the bottom or not, so where has to come straight across like that on the bottom. So we got to get rid of all this wood out here in order to create the mouth and the chin, and up in here, eventually we'll have to undercut over here, and that's accomplished when we shape the side of the hat. See, the hat comes in a nice gentle curve. So this will happen out here eventually. We'll be able to get underneath that. So draw it on, make sure you're comfortable with it, and before you do any removing of wood. You only get one chance at this, so do it right the first time. Okay? So what I'll do is I'll draw it out a little better and put it in pen, and then I'll pass it around. You have a look at it, and then we'll go from there. So there it is with the profile cut in and the center line put back in. And the trick here is to try and get both sides pretty much the same, like so this quadrant and this quadrant over here and this one over here and this one over here, pretty much the same. A little trick, if you can, you're going to lose your center line over time, so mark it underneath the chin here as well as on the top of the hat here. So if you put those marks back on there, then you'll be able to find your center line again. Alright, so now we've got to draw on how much wood we need to take off of each side. And it only goes back halfway where the halfway mark is on the side of the face, so that we can leave the ear and the rest of the hat has to stay on there. See how the hat is on the back here. So the profile is more or less straight down. I don't know whether this blue ink will show up or not. Straight down on both sides, and then kind of a flat triangle on the bottom. Does that make sense, guys? I hope so. Yeah, he has got a skinny face. But think of the body. If you're going to have a skinny body, you should have a skinny face. It would look very odd if you had a wide face with a very skinny body. Okay? So there's the trick. So now we've got to do that, and we're going to remove the wood back to there eventually, back to this line here. But draw it on first, so I'll go ahead and draw that on.